My next guest is founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. He was a senior advisor to the Bush-Cheney campaigns in both 2000 and 2004. And as chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, he led the GOP to its biggest victory in history, helping to elect the first Republican governor and third U.S. senator since Reconstruction. As executive director of the Christian Coalition from 89 to 1997, he built one of the most effective public policy organizations in recent political history. He is a best-selling author, and he's got a new book out called Evangelicals Can Vote for Trump Knowing He Has Kept His Promises. It's up on LarryYoder.com. Please welcome to the program, Ralph Reed. Ralph, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry. Honor to be with you. I'm a big fan. Appreciate all your good work, my friend.
Thank you. I've been following your career for a long time, and I've loved your work as well. You were one of the architects that helped George W. Bush get elected in 2000 and reelected in 2004. Speaking of whom, Ralph, can you get George W. to say just a shout out to President Trump, just a note, a love note, something?
Well, I remember when Elaine Chao, our outstanding Secretary of Transportation, was asked about a spat between her husband, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and President Trump. She said, "I stand by my man, both of them." And I thought that line was so good, Larry. I'm gonna steal it. So I'm a dear friend of George W. Bush. I think he was an outstanding president, and by the way, a very committed Christian. And of course, as you know, I'm a good friend of the president, a strong supporter. So they're both friends, and I love my friends, and I remain cautiously optimistic that they'll be able to work out any differences they may have.
My guest is Ralph Reed. The book is called Evangelicals Can Vote for Trump Knowing He Has Kept His Promises. Ralph, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but something has always bothered me about the way George W. Bush is perceived. I thought, Ralph, that his decision, George W. Bush's decision to surge, to send about 30,000 more troops to Iraq to turn it around, was one of the most courageous decisions I've ever seen a president make. He overruled many members of his own administration. I remember the former head of the CIA, George Tenet, publicly said he thought it wouldn't work. Obama said he thought it wouldn't work. Hillary said she thought it wouldn't work. It turned the whole thing around, and he's never, in my opinion, gotten the credit he's deserved for that incredibly courageous decision.
Yes, I totally agree. And, what I really liked about the President George W. Bush was when he made those kind of calls, he once got criticized for saying, "I'm the decider." But let me tell you something, Larry. I've had a few good friends who became president, and I learned by watching them up close that it's a very lonely office to occupy. There's lots of critics. There's lots of people carping from the sidelines. A lot of people throwing insults from the peanut gallery, but in the end, there's one person behind that resolute desk who makes calls. He made the call to go into Iraq. I still believe to this day it was the right call. I don't even want to think about Saddam Hussein or one of his sons, Uday or Qusay, still fomenting terror and bloodshed throughout that region. And today, if you've been to northern Iraq in particular, where I've been, where I spent time with the Kurds, they love America, they love Donald Trump, and they're appreciative that we gave them their freedom. I think President Trump made the right decision on the surge, and it was not the only courageous call he made.
No, it sure wasn't, Ralph Reed. And if this were a Democrat, they'd already be making a movie about how he overcame all this opposition, about how the public policy, the polls were against him, and this, that, and the other, turned it around. And they'd be casting for the movie. Probably Brad Pitt would play him. I mean, it's just so unfair. And that book, Profile in Courage, that Jack Kennedy supposedly wrote, is all about decisions like this. And that was one of the most courageous decisions I've ever seen a president make in my lifetime.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about in my book, Larry, For God and Country, the Christian Case for Trump, is a similar decision that Donald Trump made. In fact, it's almost a replay. When he made the decision in late 2017 to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, I have this in the book. Obviously, I was not there, but a very good friend of mine was there. And there was a meeting of the national security team of the president. At that time, the Secretary of Defense, of course, was Jim Mattis. The Secretary of State was Rex Tillerson. The National Security Advisor was H.R. McMaster. The president, according to my friend who was in the room, went around the room and said, where does everybody stand? Now, the vice president, as you know, Larry, by tradition, is usually silent in those group meetings.
Mm-hmm.
He waits until they meet privately to share his own views. But he went around the room, and no one was in favor of moving the embassy to Jerusalem because they thought it would create a third intifada and bloodshed in the Middle East. And when he finished going around the table without one member of his national security team supporting the decision, he reportedly turned to Jim Mattis and he said, "If I do this, do you have the troops and the resources you need to protect our assets in the Middle East?" And Jim Mattis said, "Yes, I do, sir." And he said, "Okay, then we're doing this."
Mm-hmm.
And he made the decision. It was a lonely decision. And Larry, that's one of just one of many commitments that President Trump kept, not just to his evangelical and Christian supporters, but to the American people, which is why I think they'll support him in even bigger numbers in November.
My guest is Ralph Reed. The book is Evangelicals Can Vote for Trump Knowing He Has Kept His Promises. Ralph, I go to the National Religious Broadcasters Convention every year, and I think in the year after Trump got elected, it was in Tennessee, in Nashville. And I talked to the evangelical leaders, and I said, this is a flawed vessel, right? And how is it you embrace somebody who's been thrice married, perhaps some of the relationships even overlap the other? And they all said that God chooses imperfect vessels to push his message. And I would think that, Ralph, if you are on the left and you hate evangelicals, and many on the left do because they feel that evangelicals are religious scolds, I would think it would enhance the image of evangelicals from the left perspective that somebody like Donald Trump is embraced, even though he's led a very, very flawed life.